Hi, and welcome to the Human Side of Business podcast. I'm Ange McCabe, CEO and co-founder of Intuitive Performance. I'm a performance coach, HR professional, whole person leadership facilitator, and your host. The Human Side of Business podcast is fueled by the genuine curiosity to understand how personal characteristics and skills can be leveraged to drive individual and team performance, tangible outcomes, and ultimately organizational success within business. Each podcast is devoted to sharing knowledge, expanding our learning edges, and exploring the trends in corporate culture towards growing the emotional intelligence of organizations. I'm so glad you're here. Hi, Tony. How's it going today?
It's going great. I'm so thrilled to be here.
Yes, likewise. We're happy to have you here. Everyone, I want to introduce you to Tony Martin-Eddy, and he has 25 years of business and management experience, including in life sciences, in high tech, and also has a high tech MBA from Northeastern University. He's a PCC, otherwise known as a professional certified coach, with his accreditation through ICF, who we know and love, as well as a certified EQI 2.0 and EQ 360 immunity to change coaching certifications. He also has certifications through the TTI Talent Insights and Hogan, and he is a trusted leadership advisor. Tony is an entrepreneur, an idea generator, and people connector, and he really brings together practical experience, formal training, and extreme curiosity to really elevate leaders and equip them with the tools to navigate through change and unlock their true potential. In Tony's past history, he, before becoming a leadership development advisor, he was a finance and strategy executive with experience working with some of the world's leading life sciences companies. Along his journey, he also managed small businesses and ran a financial consulting company. Tony is also the host of the Virtual Campfire podcast and the author of the soon-to-be-released Climbing the Right Mountain, Navigating the Journey to an Inspired Life. So, Tony, where do we start? I think we were going to jam on today's topic was around leadership and burnout.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I will just actually add one thing that's a slight change. My book is released. It's been out for a bit now. So yeah, thank you so much. It's called Climbing the Right Mountain. And it's been nothing short of amazing just seeing the reaction to that book. I'm actually working on my next book. So that'll be a fun thing to get out into the world.
Congratulations, Tony. I can't wait to pick up a copy and jump in.
Yeah. The topic that we've chosen is really great. Leadership and burnout, because they do go hand in hand, right?
We laugh, but ironically, yes. Unfortunately, for some. Yeah. When you're thinking about leadership and burnout, what type of experiences can you share with us around that type of topic? I mean, you have an amazing background in the sense of credentialing and being in leadership yourself. So really loving to hear your insights around the same.
Yeah. I mean, I'll start with maybe some parts of my story that will share aspects of that. For me, when I was rising into the ranks as a leader, I found myself, wanting to prove myself as a leader and realizing that I was stuck in this, pattern of continuing to work harder and harder and realizing that I wasn't prioritizing the right things.
Right.
And it's not like I was, had a malicious intent, but I was really more about trying to do the right things for everybody, but not for myself. And I think that's where we have to be careful, because I was burning myself out in the process of trying to serve others. And then I lost myself in the process of doing that. I think that's important for leaders to remember is that you can't serve others unless you're serving yourself first.
Absolutely. We can't serve from an empty cup is what I'm hearing. And definitely subscribe to those thoughts, Tony. And what's coming out of this and what I'm hearing is it's really about that self-awareness. So knowing what our flags are when it comes to feeling burnt out or feeling like we're not taking enough versus giving all of ourselves to a particular endeavor, task, or company per se.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean that like, you have to be, it's an all or nothing.
No, no.
Yeah, you have to find that way of saying, look, if I'm going to be working, a bit harder during this period of time, then I need to realize that there's times when I have to really dig into recharging just as hard. And
Absolutely.
you
And
know,
I think it's coming down, Tony, to what I would call work-life integration.
yeah.
I don't think there's ever a balance between anything. It's in some circumstances, it's giving and taking, and then also understanding what recharges you. Oftentimes, I've seen with clients is that when I ask that question, what fills your cup or what recharges you, it takes a moment for them to step back and think. And that to me is a huge sign for the opportunity to go back to that self-awareness and figure out what is it that I like and what are things that are going to be able to, in the short term, be adapted for self-care and longer term scopes as well.
Yeah. And it's an interesting thing that you shared just there, which is that it's not all about just like, okay, does recharge just mean I do nothing? Or does it mean that I sit on a couch and just, veg out? Well, it might just be quite the opposite. Some people recharge by, getting engaged in hobbies,
Yes.
or doing things that they find joy in. And so don't necessarily think of it as, completely, do nothing, but it's more about engaging in things that make you feel alive.
Definitely.
And that actually is something that can be something like maybe it's a vigorous hobby that has you doing like kite surfing, or maybe it's I enjoy glass blowing, which is something that really is something
That's
gets me
interesting.
from a different place of my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's something that is really powerful when you tap into a different part of who you are. And then when you come back to work, you come in refreshed.
Definitely. And Tony, we all have those realization moments all the way up to having experiences with burnout. Tell us more about yours.
Okay. Well, I had two of them. The first one when was a really dark one. And it was in this period where I was really burning the candle from all different ends. And I had lost sight of like spending time with my family. I realized it was the middle of the summer and I was, on vacation. I'll use my quotation marks.
Yes.
With my family, but not really on vacation. I was working because I had to get a deal done for a company I was working with. And so I found myself at this place where I was like, wow, this is not living. This is not feeling like, it doesn't feel right. And this continued on, and I continued to not take vacations. And then I felt like the color of my life just faded away. It felt very gray and drab. And I started to not really feel like I wanted to go on. So I had a really dark moment. So out of that really dark moment, I started to realize I had to do something or else I was not going to be around for my family. And I decided to see a therapist, which thankfully I did. It was a little step in the right direction. And then I started to take other steps, little steps. As I say, there's, once you break a pattern and you move in the right direction, it's like you build a muscle towards getting better and better. And I got out of that dark hole, and then I felt a lot better, but I wasn't all the way there. What really changed things for me was sitting in a boardroom of this biotech company I was working at, and I realized that I wasn't doing the work I was meant for any longer. And I decided, as I was looking around the room, that the people who were leading in this particular organization, they weren't in it for the right reasons. That they were leading because they were worried about their own, image and whether they were right or wrong. And we're in an industry that saves lives, not ruins lives, right? And I decided in that moment that I think I'm done. I was done playing that game. And I decided to get up and walk out.
Tony, that is extremely brave, I must say. Seriously. Yeah. I mean, because when you think about it, you have responsibilities in the sense of, being at the table with your family and, assisting with providing for them, et cetera, et cetera. And then on top of that, I strongly believe it takes a strong sense of being humbled to be able to have those thought processes and then be like, okay, let's do this. I'm walking away and I'm looking at things from a different lens so that I can, kind of fill my own cup first before giving things away.
Yeah, and I think I needed to go through those two moments, that I needed to have the courage from the first moment to really move into this next phase.
Yeah, well
It
put.
was definitely scary, but I said to myself that I need to leave this room to change this room, because I can't just go through life just going through the motions. I have to do something about it. And there's an old saying that came from somebody, at an old company I worked for. He said, if it is to be, it's up to you. If it is to be, it's up to me, is what he said. But I've taken that to heart. And sometimes you have to take control of your situation. Nobody's going to come and just tell you, hey, here's that thing you're looking for.
And I find kind of going down a little bit of a rabbit hole, Tony. It sparks my interest because oftentimes it's the opposite. So when you think about going to school and getting your MBA, you're told what to do, the agenda, the syllabus, the structure, et cetera, et cetera. Then you get into a job and you're told what to do and the expectations. But there's this other kind of cycle that's wrapped around all of it where you are your own creator. And yes, you're operating in these systems, but you need to really understand what lights your fire to work within different systems or said systems.
Beautifully said. And I think there's, I'll work off that for a moment, because I think there's something about that which is really important to me. I see a lot of people who hide in this, in a box. They hold themselves back and they say, this is who I am. This is what I do. And this is how I create value, if you will. The reality is that they haven't ignited the true spark inside of them that shows what they really are made of. And when you illuminate that inside, what's really inside of them, and shine that light, you'll see that there's so much more we have to offer. When you hold it yourself in a box, then you're just limiting your potential. But once you start to get that inner journey and really see what really sparks you up, what lights you up inside, then what happens is things start to change, and you start to say, I'm not going to tolerate those things I used to tolerate. And I'm not saying that in a mean way, but it's more about, like, we put up with a lot of stuff in our environments.
Yeah, definitely. And that speaks to burnout as well, coming full circle, because when we're energetically drained, to me, or mentally drained, that's worse than being physically drained. And it really compiles the impacts of burnout, right? So you're doing something that doesn't feel like your purpose and it's not fueling you. And you're in an environment that's also taking from you. And then the people around you, maybe it's anywheres from water cooler talk all the way up to a toxic workplace. And it's heavy. It can be really heavy stuff for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, it's funny how your environment shapes you, as we all have heard before. But it's like we continue to think like, oh, but this, I get paid well, or this, that, and the other thing, and all of those things that we, the butts we put in place, if you will, they start to add up, and that tension starts to build on you. And yeah, you can say that's not physical stress or physical strain, but actually it starts to become physical strain if you let it.
Absolutely. Mental changes to physical. Like, I think we're failing to understand how strong our brain power actually is, and that there's metamorphosis between mental reactions to physical reactions, So for example, like being vulnerable in my own experiences, I have kind of what I would call a phantom sciatica. So it's not there all of the time, but if I'm under a lot of stress, it sure as heck lets me know. And that's my indicator that, I need to make sure that there's more work-life integration with regards to yoga or things that really fill my cup, both physically and mentally.
Yeah. And the fact that you're mentioning this is interesting. So tomorrow, I'm actually publishing an article in Fast Company about, how tension in our body is a sign of something that's not right in our lives.
Absolutely.
And I think that's something that we need to be attuned to, is that if you're holding a lot of attention, it might be a warning sign that we need to be careful about, like, something not being right in our world.
Right.
And I hopefully don't lose people because they think like, oh, that's not really, I don't know if I agree with that, but there is truth to this, the sense that we hold tension, we strain up. Like, you think about something that's got you worried a lot. It has you feeling tense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think you can see it too, Tony, when if you were to put your hands on your shoulders and see where your shoulders are at. For some people, it's the middle of their back. Some people, it's their shoulders, but that's an indicator. If your shoulders are up by your ears, and then to your point, that's an indicator, and there's scientific proof behind it. So I don't think this is too woo-woo at all. I think it's profound timing in the sense of understanding that if we need to be if we're going to be a strong leader, it's not just about avoiding burnout and the self-care stuff and delegation, although albeit that has value. It's really understanding your needs and time and space as well.
Which has me coming back to this idea that, like, self-leadership is the start of all leadership. And self-care is a big part of self-leadership.
Right.
So, I often talk about self-leadership in the books that I write and things that I do, because I think we can't be leading others if we can't first understand how we show up and how we're taking care of ourselves first.
Definitely. And at 60,000 feet, that sounds amazing, but we'd all have different definitions of self-care. Taken, I guess, from an excerpt from your book, not verbatim, Tony, but help us understand a little bit more where you're jumping off from when you're talking about this concept of not just self-care, but self-leadership.
Self-leadership is really all about, understanding how are you, managing your beliefs and your narrative about who you think you are, and how your beliefs are setting the stage for who you want to be. Because oftentimes we're letting the external world define us, but we have to start from within and really let ourselves define us based on what we want to believe.
Absolutely.
In ourselves. And so I think that's where, when I think of self-leadership, it says, it's really about being aware of, where you've been, where you want to go, and what you can do today to ensure that you're on the path to where you're headed.
Absolutely.
It's going in that journey, but also understanding what have been the things that have held you back from living in alignment with the things that you've wanted to be.
Beautifully put. And adding into that, if we're struggling or understand that's a learning edge to reflect on the question or the statement that you just said, but in a question form, what are my beliefs? What are my areas of growth? Where am I at now? And what do I need to do to get there? If we can't answer those questions as leaders, then I strongly suggest pause this now and answer those questions, because we should all be affording ourselves that time and space. So minimally, we can continue to light our own fires instead of relying on things, other people, and environments to do so for us.
Exactly. And, it's one of the things that I often say is that my tagline in my business is inspiration through honest conversation. But the first honest conversation we have is with ourselves.
Absolutely.
We have to get honest about, those questions that we know we need to ask, but we never quite create the space to really ask them of ourselves. And I think that was part of my journey, is really kind of saying, like, who am I? Like, what do I want to live for? What am I all about? And starting to really to come into a resonance with that was important, because it started to get me clear about how I can contribute most productively into the world.
And I think we're getting better at that, but there's, I
Mhm.
think, a long way to go, or some more work to go with regards to
Yeah.
integrating those things in, our educational systems and
Yeah.
normalizing these types of conversations, both in the workplace and out of the workplace, because, strongly believing that it's a whole person. You can't segregate your business from your personal self at all. And the other thing that was coming up as you were speaking, Tony, is the thought process around when it comes to self leadership, it can mean so many different things in the
Yeah.
sense of figuring out or doing that proverbial gap analysis, all the way up to integration within your workplace. So, for example, looking at it from the perspective of, okay, if I know that, learning new things often lights my fire, being around people, looking at it from an innovative perspective and having my finger on the pulse, well, is there an opportunity within your organization to join a committee or join
Yeah.
a mutual or multiple, departmental project that can allow you to kind of fuel those things that kind of lift yourself up? You don't necessarily
Exactly.
need to be a leader to be able to do so things. You could actually be a leader of a project or a committee.
Beautifully said. There's this sense of going inside and then going outside.
Mm,
Once you figure out inside what's happening for you, then what can you do to take action that will be an external action that creates something that will move you forward? And that's exactly what you're talking about.
mm.
And what you're kind of leading me to is this. I had a TED talk that's called "Don't Check Yourself at the Door: How to Share Your True Self in the Workplace." And
I
what?
love this.
Oh, thank you. But I think part of it is that we often hold back certain things of ourselves in the workplace because we're afraid of what people will do or how they'll react to
Absolutely.
it. And in some ways, what you just described is exactly that. It's like once we start to get clear about what we want to own and who we want to be, then
Mm-hmm.
we have to think about what are we willing to share
Mm-hmm.
as leaders inside our organizations.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd be surprised at some of the things that people hold back, and even some of the things that people are willing to share. Like I had a client who played the electronic bagpipes, and I was like, never heard of that before. And I challenged him. I said, you should share that with your team. And he did. And they were like so excited and kind of like intrigued by it. And
Right.
like just a quirky little hobby, but something that opened the door for a deeper connection.
Mm-hmm.
And it created a sense of trust
Mm-hmm.
that, hey, here's a person being vulnerable about some part of them that they kind of thought a little weird, but opening the door and sharing more of themselves actually created a deeper connection. It's pretty cool.
And what simple way to put this, eh? Like it doesn't need to be onerous or grandiose. It
Yeah.
could be something as small as just sharing an intimate detail about yourself that you're comfortable with sharing with your team.
Yeah.
And to your point, it creates those strong bonds and therefore trust. And then it's a trickle effect with regards to
Yeah.
engagement. And then someone else is going to share. I've seen it in the nonprofit sector. Um, Even before COVID, they knew that they wanted a Canadian-wide team. And essentially what had happened was everybody's virtual. So they had to figure out ways of engagement. And so they wrapped this under engagement, but I think it really helped in the sense of being able to bridge the team. Yes, engagement, but also the team members were constantly revitalized because of the
Mm.
connections that they had. So they were doing, they had jobs with purpose.
Mm-hmm.
They believed the purpose, and then what they would do is within their team's calls, they would do a roundtable as to how you're showing up. So, for
Yeah.
example, if Ange had a 2-year-old that had a milk allergy and threw up all night, it was very safe for her to say, I'm
Yeah.
super tired. So if I come off short today, Tony, apologies. My daughter was up puking all night. And then everybody would kind of relate or
Yeah.
validate or, and they took maybe 5-10 minutes of that meeting. And then what trickled out from there is that when it came to hard conversations, so 6 months down the road, they had to make some really hard decisions. There was no infighting. There was no long debates, and they were actually able to look at it from a tactical perspective and accomplish it in an expedited manner because of the amount of trust that they had amongst the team across Canada.
Oh, it's beautifully said. I mean, this is exactly, we've come full circle, right? And this is where what helps us to avoid burnout is having connected teams.
Yes.
With people who will, get to know each other on a level that says like, oh, I got your back because I know you and I know what you're going through. And I know that you have my back too. And, it's because we open the aperture a little more and got to know each other that allows us to be able to do that. Whereas in an organization where there's a constant sense of competition or people feeling that they got to hold back because if they did share more, people might hold it against them. That's not good.
No, absolutely not. And I mean, doing research and working with teams and individuals from a facilitating and coaching perspective, you can get that. I would call it almost like a bucket or litmus test of how to avoid burnout. So it's things like having an effective team and clear role definition and feedback and self-awareness and.
Yeah.
However, I strongly feel what we're missing is that it kind of circles back to something you said earlier, Tony, in the sense of putting people in boxes.
Yeah.
We're never meant to be put in boxes or sit for 8 hours a day. Contrary to many opinions, I don't think what I'm going to say people will like. There are some companies that are moving towards project teams, but they're struggling with culture. And I think the biggest piece is that we're still very much focused on the task and not so much on the person as a whole. Yeah. So if we were able to truly understand what people are engaged with, we wouldn't necessarily need to have job descriptions or these quote unquote boxes, but rather identify it as, okay, there's this common goal or impact that we want to make. Who's interested, who wants to do it. And you could have multiple jobs throughout your career within one company, which could solve a lot of problems. And I don't know, maybe I'm thinking differently or the same as some out there. But I definitely think that there's fear wrapped around systematic approaches currently right now that impedes us to avoid burnout.
Yeah, it's very interesting what you just described. It has me thinking about this idea of, kind of leveraging strengths, but also looking at the places where people want to grow and saying like, hey, this new project's coming on and I have one area that I want to grow in. This project allows me to grow. So can I put my hat on that in that ring for this project?
Definitely.
But I'll also bring this strength with me that allows me to be able to add value here.
Yes.
And then it's like kind of, sure. Yeah. Let's kind of put these pieces together and make it happen.
Definitely. And we have the data and the knowledge now when it comes to understanding behaviors and levels of emotional intelligence in the workplace. And to further that concept, I would picture it that Ange's profile would have core competencies. But Tony would also be able to understand where she's at from an emotional intelligence perspective, a leadership competency. So there's a whole profile on Ange. And to your point, being able to see strengths is much easier so that we could develop some of those learning edges that are quite interesting to other people. And I strongly feel that also backs into things like workload management, being able to delegate appropriately, taking away ego in leadership, I think, because it's breaking down the walls of hierarchy, essentially, for the most part. Like you would still have to have leaders, project leaders, team leaders, etc. But all this to say is that I feel looking at more so of a behavioral system or strength building system for teams, it organically helps create that safe space because you don't feel in environments like that, you wouldn't feel like employee number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You would feel like Ange, and this is what I've co-created with my senior management team to grow my skills. And these are the type of projects that I'll jump into as long as, maybe certain criteria are met, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I love your model. I love where you're thinking. And I think this really is something we need to make happen. And, a while back, I came up with this idea that, the focus was always on employee engagement. Like we have to get them engaged. And I get it. That's been the model for so long. But I started thinking, well, maybe it's not just about engagement. It's about focusing on employee enrichment. You get employees on board and how can I make them better?
Mm-hmm.
And if I focus on that, the enrichment of employees, then it's not just about, focusing on getting them to stay put or making them happy in this space, but it's about making them better because they come here. And
Absolutely.
the model you just described is all about like, hey, we'll continue to find opportunities for you to build the strengths that you want to build on,
Yes.
and leverage the things that you're good at already, because that makes people feel good. It's motivating.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is where enrichment will come from.
Mm-hmm. And the domino effect of enrichment is connectivity. Google did a survey a few years ago, and I don't know if I have all the stats correct
Yeah.
here, so bear with me. But essentially, the essence of this study that they did was productivity on teams and what made a highly productive team. And, to our dismay, it wasn't emotional intelligence or disc behaviors. It kind of hurt my heart to read that. But in actuality, it was one of the things was as simplistic as connection. And so when you think about job enrichment, there's multiple connectivity opportunities and kind of pinpoints to put in there. And that's why people stay. That's what true engagement means, is that they have their own motivations or internal motivations to be able to stay within a particular job or company.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Remember that study? I think it's called the Project Aristotle is what they called it.
Yes.
And that was like the starting point of a lot of Amy Edmondson's work on psychological safety too, which
Mm-hmm.
was really profound. So amazing. It's
Mm-hmm.
amazing.
Definitely. So if you were to I like the kind of creativity between us right now, Tony. If you were to think about burnout,
Yes.
what do you think are becoming new trends when it comes to burnout? I mean, a lot's gone on in the past couple of years with pandemics, another economic downturn. There has been a lot of realizations around the need to have human equity in the same. So, do you feel that burnout's shifting? And if so, what trends are you seeing with your clients?
Yeah, I mean, as much as the different generations have different flavors of burnout, if you will, and different ways of managing it. So there's definitely that happening. We have, certain groups are saying like, hey, look, I'm just not going to do the things that you're asking me to do. And so I'm going to manage my workload in a different way. And therefore, try to avoid burnout in that way. Then there's still some individuals who are just sticking to their same thing. They're like, as much as you say it's not about being here early and leaving here late, or even working from home where you're never actually, clocking in or clocking out, still feel like this is the way to do the work. So I think leaders have to make sure that they model the best practices. They have to show people that we're not watching you. And I know that's not really the case. Not all leaders are this way. We need to make sure that we're showing people we're not watching you, day in and day out, whether or not you're starting at like 5 o'clock in the morning and clocking out at 6. What we want to make sure is that we're productive and that you're taking care of yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And taking time off. I mean, one of the things that is what has been historically the biggest issue is that people feeling like they're the martyr or the hero of the day by sacrificing themselves in the process of trying to do these things. And the reality is that's not the way to make things work. So I think ultimately I'm still hearing that trend towards the old way to an extent with a lot of my clients, especially the ones who are like the Gen X and older.
Yes.
But I think the reality is we need to make sure we manage that down and say, you're the ones who people are looking to model the way. And I'll also say that when it comes down to burnout in general, I think there's, as entrepreneurs, there's also a mentality of like, this is a work I love to do. So why would I stop? You have to check in on the things that you love doing and make sure that even though you love it, don't let it become a prison for you. You have to make sure that you are also recharging your battery.
Yeah, and it comes down to balance. And speaking to things that we can do right now in the workplace, When people say take micro breaks and downtime, I think that backs into kind of what you were speaking to, Tony. It's not about, have you worked straight through 9 to 5 and work through your lunch break and won the award of most hour time worked in this past week. No, it's, did you hit the objectives? Did you make an impact this week? And by the way, what are you doing to recharge your batteries throughout the day? Whether it be a walk at lunch or having a conversation with a coworker outside of the office to have coffee. And I think it's up to our key stakeholders and organizations to allow for this stuff to happen, right? And trust that we're all adults and we're there to do great things. And if we're not meeting objectives, there's always opportunities to have those conversations.
Exactly. And I think one thing I'll also add here is a sense of like, what we should be rewarding is smart work.
Yes.
And what I mean by that is that if someone's able to like change a process to make it more streamlined and in the process makes it, so that they don't have to work quite as hard, then, hey, that's fantastic. Let's do that. Let's do more of that. Give them awards for making work smarter. And then showing other people that we're not saying that you have to do it exactly as we told you. If you can find a better way, then we're all for it. And if that frees you up to do some more stuff you want to do, fantastic. Let's do more of that. Or if, the workflow is just what you need, then great. You keep on doing what you're doing.
We've unpacked a lot today, Tony. Based on, everything that we've discussed, help me understand what's some low-hanging fruit that I can keep with me from a habit forming perspective around managing burnout.
Yeah, I love, this is an easy one that I often tell my clients, and it's, if you look into your next week and you look at your calendar and you say to yourself, what am I looking forward to next week? And if there's nothing on your calendar that gives you any sense of joy, excitement, or any spark of any sort, then it's time to change your calendar, even if it's just one thing. One thing on your calendar next week that you can look forward to, because that one thing that you have on your calendar will give you some fuel to actually make it through the rest of the challenging parts of your week. So that will keep you from making your life a pattern of burnout. Instead, it will make it a pattern of, hey, at least I, have this big event I'm looking for, or this coffee I'm going to have with my colleague, or a dinner out with my loved ones.
That's fantastic. Well put. And Tony, tell us a little bit about your practice, what you have to offer, and where we can find you.
Fantastic. So I offer one-on-one coaching for leaders of all different levels, but I also do a lot of work with people who are in teams. So I do teamwork, group programs. And then I also do some leadership development programs. So I come into organizations and offer up some unique experiences for them. And if you want to learn more about my work, you can find it on my website, which is ipurposepartners.com. I just recently changed the name from Inspired Purpose Coaching to Inspired Purpose Partners. So that's where you can find me on my website.
Fantastic. And you'd mentioned earlier about a podcast. Tell us more about this.
Yes, my podcast is available on all the channels, and as well as on my website. And it's called The Virtual Campfire. And it's a podcast that is all about sharing stories of people's transformations, their journeys to getting to where they're making a big impact in the world. And I uncover what I call flashpoints, the points in their journey that have ignited their gifts into the world. So.
That sounds amazing. Amazing. I can't wait to listen to more. Thank you so much for joining us today, Tony. It's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you so much. It's been really fun.
Thanks for listening to the Human Side of Business podcast. I'm glad you could join us. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to stay updated with our latest content, make sure to visit our website. The link can be found in the episode description, where you can subscribe to the podcast, sign up for our newsletter, and learn more about our whole person leadership services. Sounds interesting? Explore the Whole Person Leadership Cohort by Intuitive Performance, a unique program that offers unparalleled support to managers on every step of their leadership journey. Our program features evidence-based assessments, workbooks, group coaching, and interactive learning experiences to help you level up your leadership skills. Reach out today to apply to one of our upcoming cohorts. Until next time, take care and stay curious.